The flattest place on Earth isn't a desert, isn't a lake bed, and it definitely isn't a parking lot. It's a place so perfectly level that standing in the middle of it feels like standing on another planet, where the horizon disappears, where the sky and ground become one, and where your eyes can't tell up from down. This place is so flat that NASA uses it to calibrate satellites from space. And what you're about to discover will completely change how you think about our planet's geography. Stay with me, because the story of how this impossible landscape was created involves ancient oceans, dramatic geological forces, and enough lithium to power every electric car on Earth for the next century. And the most mind-blowing part? It turns into the world's largest mirror. Picture this: 10,000 square kilometers of pure white salt stretching to the horizon in every direction. No hills, no valleys, no variation whatsoever. Just an endless expanse of brilliant white hexagonal patterns that look like they were drawn by some obsessive-compulsive giant. This is Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia, the largest salt flat on Earth. And it's so geometrically perfect that the entire surface has an elevation variation of less than 1 meter across its entire expanse. 1 meter, across an area the size of Jamaica. To put that in perspective, if you shrunk Salar de Uyuni down to the sides of a basketball court, the highest and lowest points would differ by less than the thickness of a human hair. It's flatter than any man-made surface we've ever created, flatter than the smoothest road, flatter than a mirror. And here's what makes this absolutely incredible. This perfection wasn't engineered by humans. Nature did this, completely by accident, through a series of geological events that took millions of years. But how? How does nature create something this impossibly flat? The answer takes us back 40,000 years to when this region looked nothing like it does today. Back then, this entire area was covered by a massive prehistoric lake called Lake Minchin. We're talking about a body of water so large it covered parts of what are now Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. But then the climate changed. Temperatures rose, rainfall decreased, and slowly, over thousands of years, the lake began to die. As the water evaporated, it left behind everything that had been dissolved in it: minerals, salts, and other compounds. This process created a series of smaller lakes, and one of them, Lake Tauca, eventually became what we now know as Salar de Uyuni. But here's the key. When a lake evaporates in a completely flat basin with no outlet, the dissolved salts have nowhere to go. They crystallize evenly across the entire surface, creating a perfectly level plain of salt deposits up to 10 meters thick in some places. The salt itself is primarily sodium chloride, the same stuff in your kitchen shaker, mixed with lithium, potassium, and magnesium. And speaking of lithium, here's where this story takes a dramatic turn into the future. Beneath this pristine white surface lies approximately 9 million tons of lithium, representing anywhere from 50 to 70% of the world's total lithium reserves. More than half the world's lithium just sitting there under a salt flat in one of the poorest countries in South America. Would you walk across a surface that holds the key to the future of electric vehicles and renewable energy? Because that's exactly what Salar de Uyuni represents. As the world transitions away from fossil fuels, lithium has become the new oil, essential for batteries in everything from smartphones to electric cars to grid-scale energy storage. And Bolivia is sitting on a lithium gold mine that could transform the country's economy overnight. But there's a problem, and it's one that perfectly captures the tension between economic development and environmental preservation. Extracting lithium requires vast amounts of water in a region that's already water scarce. The process involves pumping lithium-rich brine to the surface, letting it evaporate in pools, and then processing the concentrated lithium. This takes time, uses tremendous amounts of water, and could potentially damage the very thing that makes Salar de Uyuni special: its pristine, otherworldly beauty. The Bolivian government has been cautious about exploitation, trying to balance economic opportunity with environmental protection and the interests of local indigenous communities who view the salt flat as sacred. But let's get back to what makes this place truly magical, because we haven't even talked about the most spectacular thing that happens here. During the rainy season, from November to March, something extraordinary occurs. A thin layer of water, usually just a few centimeters deep, covers the entire salt flat. And because the surface is so perfectly flat, this water spreads out evenly, creating the world's largest mirror. I'm not exaggerating. When conditions are perfect, the salt flat becomes a flawless reflection of the sky, spanning thousands of square kilometers. Clouds are reflected so perfectly, you can't tell where the ground ends and the sky begins. People appear to be walking on clouds. The horizon vanishes completely. It's one of the most surreal visual experiences on Earth, like stepping into an M.C. Escher drawing, where reality bends and the normal rules of perspective no longer apply. Photographers from around the world make pilgrimages to capture this phenomenon. The images they produce are stunning. People appearing to float in infinite whiteness, vehicles driving on clouds, the Milky Way reflected below your feet, as if you're standing in space itself. These aren't Photoshop tricks. This is real. This is what happens when you have a perfectly flat surface covered by a perfectly still layer of water under a clear sky. The laws of physics create something that looks impossible. But here's something most tourists don't realize. Walking on the salt flat during the wet season is actually walking on a fragile ecosystem. The water that creates the mirror effect also sustains unique microorganisms and provides breeding grounds for 3 species of flamingos. Yes, flamingos, in the middle of a salt desert at nearly 4,000 meters elevation. These birds feed on algae and small crustaceans that live in the shallow waters. And Salar de Uyuni is one of their critical breeding sites. The area around the salt flat is dotted with islands, the remnants of ancient volcanic peaks that once rose from Lake Minchin. The most famous is Incahuasi Island, covered in giant cacti that can live for over 1,000 years. Standing on this island and looking out over the endless white expanse is like being on an alien planet. The silence is absolute. The air is so thin at this altitude, you can feel every breath. And the landscape is so stark, so utterly different from anything else on Earth that your brain struggles to process it. Now here's a detail that connects ancient history to cutting-edge science. Salar de Uyuni is so flat and so large that it's visible from space. And its geometric precision makes it perfect for calibrating satellites. When space agencies like NASA need to test the accuracy of their satellite altimetry instruments that measure the height of Earth's surface, they use Salar de Uyuni as a reference because they know exactly how flat it is. The salt flat has become a natural calibration tool for some of humanity's most advanced technology. The local economy has transformed because of tourism to the salt flat. Small towns that were once isolated and struggling now host thousands of visitors each year. Local guides, many of them indigenous Aymara people, lead tours across the salt flat, to the islands, and to nearby colored lagoons where flamingos congregate in massive flocks. Salt hotels have been built entirely from blocks of salt, walls of salt, furniture of salt, floors of salt. You can literally lick the walls if you want, though I'm not sure why you would. But tourism brings its own problems. The increasing number of visitors is leaving behind trash, damaging the fragile salt crust with vehicle tracks, and disrupting the flamingo breeding sites. There's no real infrastructure for waste management, and the environmental impact is growing. It's another example of the double-edged sword of ecotourism. The money helps local communities, but the visitors threaten the very thing they came to see. Climate change is also affecting Salar de Uyuni in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. Changes in precipitation patterns could alter the seasonal flooding that creates the mirror effect. Rising temperatures could accelerate evaporation, potentially exposing more of the lithium-rich layers beneath. The delicate balance that created and maintains this unique landscape could be disrupted, and we don't fully understand what the consequences might be. There's also a darker side to the Salt Flats history. During Bolivia's struggle for independence and in various conflicts since, Salar de Uyuni's remoteness made it a place of exile and punishment. Political prisoners were sent here to work in brutal conditions, mining salt under the intense, high-altitude sun. Some never returned. The beautiful, otherworldly landscape holds stories of suffering that are largely forgotten today. What strikes me most about Salar de Uyuni is how it represents a collision of different timescales and different values. The geological processes that created it operated over millions of years. The lithium beneath it represents the future of energy technology. The indigenous communities who live around it have traditions going back centuries. The tourists who visit spend maybe a day or two. And the flamingos return each year, indifferent to all the human drama, just looking for a place to breed. All of these different timelines and interests intersecting in one impossibly flat place. The experience of standing in the middle of Salar de Uyuni during the mirror season is genuinely transcendent. When the water is perfectly still and the sky is clear, you lose all sense of orientation. There's no up or down, no sense of distance or scale. You could be floating in space, or standing in a dream, or existing in some dimension where the normal rules don't apply. It's disorienting and beautiful and slightly terrifying all at once. It makes you feel very small. So when you see those viral photos of people doing perspective tricks on the salt flat, making it look like someone is standing in a giant's hand or sitting on top of a tiny person, remember that those images work because of millions of years of geological processes that created the flattest natural surface on Earth. Every perfectly level square kilometer represents ancient lakes evaporating, tectonic forces shaping the landscape, and chemical processes crystallizing salt in precise hexagonal patterns. Nature spent millions of years creating the perfect canvas, and we get to walk on it, photograph it, and try to figure out how to preserve it, while also potentially mining the fortune buried beneath it. The flattest place on Earth isn't just a geographical curiosity.
It's a window into deep time, a mirror reflecting both sky and society, a repository of resources we desperately need, and a fragile ecosystem that deserves protection. It's all of these things at once, and that's what makes it so fascinating and so important. Because Salar de Uyuni forces us to think about what we value: pristine natural beauty, economic development, indigenous rights, scientific, ecological preservation. There are no easy answers. There's just this impossibly flat expanse of white salt, waiting for us to decide what it means and what we're willing to sacrifice to protect it.